In this movie, we're going to have a look at the truly magnificent 3D camera tracker. Now, when I first saw this included in After Effects CS6, I thought, great feature for visual effects artists. And then I started playing with it and realised that it's a fantastic feature for motion graphic designers as well as visual effects artists. Now, if you want to follow along with this, you can open up 3D Camera Tracker AEP, which you can find in the basic compositing folder. And here, if I mouse over, you'll see I'm highlighting a clip from Artbeat's S3D collection, and they have a wonderful collection of stereo 3D footage, and that's what I'm using here. So we're just loading that into RAM by clicking the RAM preview button just to see what's included. This is a shot taken by helicopter. What I want to do is somehow capture that 3D data from the camera moving around the scene. So I want to make it look as if the graphics are tracked into the shot, so they move with the building. Kind of like the effect that you would see on something like the Panic Room titles, very similar to that. So what we're going to do is we're going to track the footage, 3D track, and it's very easy to do in After Effects CS6. You can apply an effect, and if I type in 3D and close up my animation presets, you'll notice that the 3D camera tracker appears there in the perspective category. Obviously, you can also drag it onto your clip. Obviously, you can apply it from the effect menu as well, but my preferred approach is just to right-click on the footage that I want to track and say Track Camera. And there it goes, it kicks off, starts analysing in the background for me. Now, it's going to take a little bit of time to analyse, so why don't you go and make a cup of tea or do whatever you want to do for a couple of minutes. It'll probably take about, I don't know, a minute or two, maybe, to track this. It says time remaining 3 minutes. It's usually a bit quicker than that. Now, I'm going to leave that tracking in the background. Notice that it tracks in the background, so I could go and work on another project or another composition while it's tracking. So I could open up my tracker end comp, for example, and just show you the final result of what we're going to be doing. And the tracker is still computing and working away in the background. Now, at the moment, the info palette is showing my render progress, but if we stop RAM previewing, it will update to tell me the progress with the camera tracker in the other comp. So I'll also get an update of when that's ready for me. So this is what we're going to create. We're going to create this Artbeats logo in 3D tracked into the shot so it looks as if the camera is moving past it. So let's jump back to our other comp and see how it's going. It's still got a little bit of time left, so I've actually got one in the background ready to use. So I'm going to switch off the eyeball on that one, but leave it processing. And I'm going to click on the shy switch. So in here I have another one that I've already tracked, and if I select the camera tracker effect, you'll notice it places all of these crosses over my footage. And also if I hover over, that I get this strange target moving across my footage and adjusting the plane as it does so. We'll talk about the target in a minute. But you can see these little crosses. Now at the moment, you can't really see very clearly the crosses in the background because I'm zoomed out to third resolution here. If I just make those a little bit bigger, the track points, you'll start to see them. And basically what it's doing, it's created 3D tracking points, and the ones off in the distance are a lot smaller than the ones in the foreground, showing you clearly that there's depth in here. And I can just adjust the size of those to make that clearer if I need to. Now it's showing me the 3D solve track points, and that's why we get this difference in size depending on distance from the camera. If I go to 2D source, it's showing me the tracking points it found on the 2D footage before it solved it into a 3D camera track. So let's go to 3D solved again and just bring the size down a little bit. Now these all track points that were successfully tracked on the footage, and if I move the target, you'll notice that as I move over the footage and hover over these points, it selects a triangulation between 3 points and places the target on the plane that matches that particular triangulation. If I click on that and select it, notice it highlights those 3 points, And once highlighted, I can actually move the tracker around because the center of the tracker target will be the center of the layer that I place on there, or the anchor point rather of the layer or text layer that I place on there. So I can move it around. If I hold down the Alt key or Option key on the Mac, I can scale it into position exactly where I want it. And I can create a nice helicopter landing pad on top of this building. Now, if I want to add points to that, I can shift click to add points and create a tracking region using more of the points. So they can be added, they can also be removed by shift clicking. You can even drag a selection around them. So if I was to deselect that and move somewhere else, like here, I can actually hold down the Alt key and drag a selection around the points that I want to use. I can actually drag a selection around the points that I want to use. So lots of keyboard shortcuts in there to help you. Now I'm going to come away from that and I'm just going to use the default, which would be to choose 3 points. And I'm going to choose, which ones am I going to choose? I actually think these 3 are pretty successful here. I'm also going to add one more point to it, and that places my target exactly where I want it on the building. So how do I then place a piece of footage on it? Well, I right click and I could create text and camera, and that's going to create a text layer and a camera. Or I could create a solid and a camera, or a null and a camera. So obviously these are all going to create something that matches in with the shot. I'm going to start by creating a solid and a camera just to show you how that works. So I'll say create solid and camera, and that places a solid onto that building, and watch what happens. If I ram preview, it attaches it to the building. It's just absolutely amazing, this tool. So there we have a solid layer attached to the building. Now, what can I do now? Well, what I could do is replace it with a graphic. So if I move over to my project panel, I've got the Artbeats logo in there. What I'm going to do is select that solid and hold down the Option key or Alt key on Windows and drag the Artbeats logo onto the solid to replace it. And we now have a logo attached, which is just amazing. So what I can do now is I can rotate that logo. So first thing I'm going to do is just move my anchor point so it's down at the bottom of the logo here, so that when I rotate it, it rotates around that bottom point. And I'm going to hit R for rotation. Now you can use the values in here if you want to down in the timeline. So I could use the rotation value down here in the timeline, or you can use the values, the axes up here in the composition panel. And I find that they're quite useful because you can take advantage when in 3D of the different axes mode when you're moving around inside that 3D composition. So if I select the rotation tool, for example, and I want to use world axis mode or view axis mode, it can make it easier to reposition that layer. So either is fine. So just make an adjustment till you get it exactly where you want it. And there we have our logo tracked into the shot. So let's scale it down a little bit because it's a little bit too big at the moment. And what I want to do is I want to get it lit as well, lit nicely and casting shadows. So what we're going to do is go back into the effect. So select the effect again. I'm going to double click it to open it up here so we can see what we're doing. Now I could have done this at the same time that I did the text and made sure I had exactly the same target area, but I'm not going to worry too much about that at the moment. I'm just going to reselect some of these points. So let's just select one of those planes. Let's move ahead a little bit. And I think it was one of these that we selected. I can always add, as I said, a few points to that, making sure that's not the wrong one. Okay. So once I have the plane where I want it, let's just add one more to that. Again, I can right click on it and access the menu. So as I said earlier on, what I really should have done is created the solid, and then with the plane still active, created a shadow catcher. Notice that you also have options for creating multiple text layers, solids and nulls, which is really handy if you want to attach multiple objects to the points that you've selected. And it will count how many you've selected. So I have 8 points selected. So it's offering to add 8 items. So we're going to say create shadow catcher and light, and that creates a shadow catcher layer for us. Now you have to be careful. At the moment I'm in fast draft mode because I've been working in ray traced 3D. Now what I really recommend is either go to final quality, okay, but if we're in ray traced 3D, that's going to take a little bit of time to render. You'll notice that the layer disappears when we do that. What I recommend doing is actually switching to classic 3D while we're working with the 3D tracker. And we'll come back to ray trace 3D later to add 3D extrusion to our object. Now you'll notice something strange has happened. My layer's virtually disappeared and the object behind it has disappeared. And that's because, as a default, the shadow catcher, if we double hit the A key to set the material options, is set to only accept shadows. Now if I put that back on to off, it will switch it off, and if I put it on to on, it will accept shadows. And quite often I switch that on just to get my shadows in the right place and figure out what's going on. Now the other thing is, the Artbeats logo, because of the light shining on it, has gone very, very dark indeed. The light is actually behind it. So we have two choices. It's placed the light where it thinks it should be in the comp, so I don't really want to adjust it and move it in front to light my text. Although I could create another new light and place that into the comp and use that to light the front of the text if I want to. Or another option, let's just switch that off temporarily, we might use it again later, is to select the Artbeats logo, double hit the A key, and if we put light transmission on, we should get a bit of colour coming through. Now you can see the colour casting on the ground now from the logo, on the shadow catcher layer, but we're still not seeing blue colour on our actual light. So there are ways of adjusting it. We could adjust the diffuse value here, and that's going to boost the amount of colour that we see. We could increase or decrease the ambient light, but that's already on maximum. We can play around with the material options if we want to, but if we can't get exactly what we want by adjusting the material options, then what we can do is just switch on this other light, which is up at the top here. And I'm just going to go into its settings and just bring down the intensity a little bit using my lovely fully updating modal dialog box, which I just absolutely adore. Love seeing that update as I'm dragging. Okay, so I think we'll go with something like that. Click on OK, because I'm going to make it 3D and it will stand out a lot more once it's 3D. So let's go into the shadow catcher, double hit the A key, and put our shadows back on only. And we get a little bit of light shining on the building. I know it's not much, but I quite like it anyway. So once we've set this up, let's have a little preview of it. Okay, we've set that up. It's tracking quite nicely to the building. But what I want to do is make the text look really three-dimensional. And in order to do that, I need to switch to Ray Traced 3D. So we're going to click on OK after choosing Ray Trace 3D, and that's going to take a little bit longer to render. On my MacBook Pro, the cooling fan is starting to go and it's taking a little bit longer to render, but it's not too bad. So I'm going to go into my geometry options and into my Artbeats logo, and you'll notice, oh dear, I can't get access to my extrusion, and that's because an Illustrator file can only be curved really rather than extruded. But if I go up to layer, create shapes from vector layer, what that's going to do is create some shapes with exactly the same properties. And nice thing about that is I have more control over the logo in terms of adding fills and strokes and things like that. But also, if I open it up, I can go in there and I can extrude it in 3D. And if we move through a little bit further, now that's taking a little bit of time to update now that I'm adding 3D to it. You'll see that it reacts much more to the light now because the edges are picking up that light. Now I'm going to switch to fast draft mode just to make the changes, and then we'll have a look at how it looks in fully rendered ray traced 3D a little bit later. Nice thing about fast draft mode is it allows me to very quickly extrude that text. We can add a bevel to it. In fact, let's just zoom in so we can see that happening a bit more. So I can use the period key on the keyboard just to zoom in, hold down spacebar just to move that. So let's make our bevel a bit bigger. Now the only thing about that is when we have a look at the text from the front, you'll notice that any text with holes, the holes start to disappear a little bit. So I'm going to bring the whole bevel depth back a little bit. So we'll bring that down to about a value of 10 or 20%, something like that. And that allows the text to be readable. So let's zoom back out again and preview that. And I think that's starting to look really nice. So we start to get our 3D text. So let's have a look at how that looks on final quality. Takes a couple of seconds to render. And we could even mess around with the light. I think if I open up the light, I could try taking that down a lot further. So have a very low value of light there. Now, while we're in there, I just want to show you something really fantastic. If I was to adjust the point of interest of that light, notice I lose all my RAM preview frames that I've just built up for you so I can show you this shot. With the new caching features, watch what happens. If I undo changing that value, my RAM preview frames appear again, which is fantastic, which means I can RAM preview that for you in real time. Now, if you wanted to, you could then animate the logo as well, have the logo coming towards the camera. And if you wanted to, you can make it into a true S3D shot or stereo 3D shot. And to do that, you can create a stereo 3D rig. And you'll need the left and right view from Artbeats to do that. So this has got the right view in it. If you go to artbeats.com, you can also get the left view. And then you can create a true stereo 3D scene where the text will appear to fly past the building and come towards you if you're wearing your 3D glasses and you've set it up using 3D camera rig settings in After Effects. And there are lots of tutorials available to help you do that. So that's a little bit about the 3D camera tracker and how you can use it for motion graphics to track text into a shot and do all other host of things with the 3D camera tracker. I love it.